Hello TYT Sports, hello YouTube fans, my name is Josh Gibbs, Chief Joshiola here. As the WWE correspondent for TYT Sports, of course I have to talk about the Ric Flair 30 for 30 that premiered the other night on ESPN. TYT Sports already put out a great video about the best Ric Flair quotes, complete with woo sound effects and all that stuff here. But the great thing about this video is you don't have to have seen the 30 for 30 to comment on it. And what we're looking for is your either opinions on the 30 for 30 if you watched it, or just your opinions on Ric Flair, the man, the myth, the wrestling legend. Whichever one appeals to you. We just wanted a great Ric Flair video to throw up there. But I was going to go over just a couple of things that I noticed from the 30 for 30, just 5 points that I pulled out that I think were the most intriguing. And then, as always with these videos, I want your opinion. I want to know what you think about these same things. Do you agree with the way I interpreted it or not? First thing right off the bat, what a great, an interesting documentary. It's the good, the bad, and the ugly. It was a warts and all perspective of a guy who has spent his entire life being a professional wrestler and somebody who's 68 years old now. And the thing that I thought was the most remarkable was just his face. I mean, it was cut, it was scarred, it was beat up. You could just tell this guy has been through a lot. It looked like he had just been in a fight the other day. And that's something that stuck with me the entire time while he's talking. It's that he carries his story around with him. You know, people say, oh, he wears his heart on his sleeve. Well, he wears it all over his body. And it was interesting to see that displayed in every single conversation, in every smile, and when he teared up talking about his son. All that was brought to the forefront. So these are the 5 things that I thought was that were the most compelling out of this video. So we'll see if you agree. First one on whether or not, when they asked him about wrestling, is it real, or how do you react when they say wrestling is fake? And he said it's not fake, it's choreographed. We started using the word choreographed probably in the past 15 years. That is absolutely right, and it's probably a guarantee that someone on this video will say wrestling is stupid, wrestling is fake, because it happens in every video that we make for WWE. But that's okay, because I take that with a grain of salt, because some people just don't know. Maybe they don't understand what professional wrestling really is. And that's okay, as long as you're willing to listen and understand, because it's not fake. To call it fake implies that it's trying to be something it's not. And yeah, way back in the day, wrestling was presented as real, or at least the storylines and all that stuff was presented as real, owning back to their days as a circus act, when all of that stuff was presented as genuine and real, and that's how it was sold. But then as the years went on, the moniker sports entertainment became the preferred term, because that's what it is. It's choreographed. And yeah, it is 2 guys, or 2 women, or more than that, working together to put on a good show. I mean, ultimately, yeah, the finish is determined, but you don't know that. It's the same as what if I said that every NFL game was predetermined? Somebody knew, like Roger Goodell, he knew the outcome of every NFL game. Would you stop watching because you say, oh, well, the NFL's fake? Of course not, because you don't know how it's going to end. So that's what makes it entertaining. I mean, there's enough people who already think sports is rigged as it is, but pro wrestling is the same. You're watching it for the spectacle. Ultimately, who wins and who loses almost becomes irrelevant to the actual show itself, to the performance that's being put on by these men and women. That's what's so important, and that's what made Flair so good, is because he recognized that that's what it was about. It was the entertainment aspect. It's all that other stuff that leads up to a match. And that's why he was so good at cutting promos and saying the things he said and getting people either intrigued to watch him win, or so infuriated they wanted to watch him lose. When he talked about being with 10,000 women, he said, I probably took it, meaning monogamy, serious for one day. I mean, I tried, but I was just miserable. Now, I had this conversation with a couple of people, and I think this is something that we need to take with a grain of salt. When he makes these kinds of claims, I think, and it kind of leads into my third point too, about how much he drank, where he said he drank 10 beers and 5 mixed drinks a day for 20 years. So, and he talked to a sports psychologist about that back in the 80s. Now, am I going to call Ric Flair a liar? Of course not. Am I going to say that Ric Flair is probably exaggerating or using a bit of hyperbole here? Yeah, because let's remember who Ric Flair is as an entertainer. He's that. He's a liar. That's what entertainers are. They have to inflate who they are and what they do. Method Man was famously asked what makes him a good rapper. And he said, good rappers are good liars. And he said one car becomes two cars, two houses become five houses, that kind of thing. That's what makes you embellish. That's what makes for a better story than the one you know. And professional wrestlers are no different. They have to lie. That's part of the character. That's part of the life. And we saw in the 30 for 30 documentary that came true. And that was actually Flair's downfall, is he was living the lie. He couldn't afford the Rolexes. He couldn't afford the jets. He couldn't afford all that stuff. But it was part of who he was and who he was trying to sell himself as. But at the end of the day, we have to remember it was still a lie. And so when Flair makes these claims, then I think we need to also look at them with a little bit of kind of nodding your head and saying, okay, sure. Has Ric Flair undoubtedly slept with a lot of women in his life? No question. Is it 10,000? I find that difficult to believe. The same way when Wilt Chamberlain said it, I just nodded my head and said, "Okay, sure, man, sure, it was a lot." But it's one of these things that becomes apocryphal, where there's no way for you to verify it. So you can't prove that it's true, but you can't prove that it's not true. So then that leaves us somewhere in the middle. So as far as the women he's been with or the alcohol he's drank, has he done damage to himself internally? Oh, undoubtedly. I mean, that's been proven. Physically, he's done damage, but. Should we back up his boasts and things like that? That all depends on how you want to view Ric Flair. Do you want them to be true? If so, then they're true. If you're a little bit skeptical like me, then fine. Then you don't take it, literally. But that doesn't make it any less intriguing. It doesn't make the myth any more real for his character. The fourth one is about Snoop Dogg. When he talked about Flair's flashy image, he said, quote, "As a kid growing up and watching Ric Flair, he was inspirational to myself and a lot of other hip-hop artists. He represented what we wanted to be. We wanted to be Ric Flair. We wanted to be flamboyant. And, the kiss stealing, wheeling, dealing. We wanted to be all that. He was part of our culture and our life. That's why we love him and we cherish him. And we've always held him high in the black community because Rick is one of us." And I found that extremely interesting because... his influence goes far beyond professional wrestling. Even in a time when professional wrestling was kind of whispered in high school hallways and nobody was really rocking wrestling shirts out in public as much as they are now, it was still one of these things that nerdy kids liked. And you sort of had to hide away from it. Whereas now it's almost not cool. You're almost not cool if you don't know these catchphrases, if you don't at least become familiar with it. I mean, look at the way the WWE has invaded sports culture. Whenever a sports team wins a championship, be it the Super Bowl or the World Series or the Stanley Cup, one of the things they get is a championship belt from the WWE with a personalized plate that has that team's logo on it, presented by Triple H. So they don't get belts from a different organization. They get it from the WWE. They get a professional wrestling belt, and they look forward to that. And they hold it high during their parades. So they're not ashamed of that kind of thing. So this has invaded all these other types of culture, not just pop culture, but sports as well. And so for Snoop Dogg to say that shows his influence in the music culture as well, and in a culture that you normally wouldn't associate somebody like Ric Flair with, a 68-year-old white guy. But rap culture is perfectly fitted for his character and perfectly aligns with that boasting. And going back to what we talked about with Method Man's quote, they fit so well together in what their characters are supposed to do, the stories they're supposed to tell, and the lifestyle that they're supposed to exude. Ric Flair did all of that, and you see it now. You see it in rap videos and hip-hop videos, stuff like that. So Ric Flair was doing that before rap was even doing it. And I don't think Snoop Dogg goes so far as to say that he invented that, but at the same time, he has been a part of that community, and he represented what they wanted to be. And I think it's a fantastic example by Snoop Dogg, because he's exactly right. And it just shows how much respect people had for him outside of wrestling. And maybe it brought in other wrestling fans simply because they liked Ric Flair. They liked what he did. They liked the character he was and the things that he brought to the entertainment aspect of what professional wrestling is. And finally, probably the most unfortunate was what he would have said to his son, his late son Reed, who died in 2013 of a drug overdose. His dad, he was trying to become a professional wrestler himself. He said, quote, "I say it every day. God, I wish you were here. I had so much fun with you, and I regret the fact that I sometimes was your best friend instead of your dad." And what I took from that, more so than than about not just Flair being sad that his son has passed, but if we accept that addiction is a disease, and Flair talks about saying he was addicted to being Ric Flair. He wasn't addicted to being a normal person. He was addicted to what the character of Ric Flair was and what he represented, which led to his alcoholism and infidelity and things like that. But if we accept that it is a disease, then his son had it too, just like Ric Flair did. But the difference is Ric Flair survived. His son didn't. And I guarantee if he could switch places with his son, he would. And it's one of these things where it's not fair. Where why does Ric Flair, who supposedly did all of these crazy, crazy things, why did he survive? And even with his recent health scare, when he had an intestinal blockage so serious that he had to be hospitalized and part of his colon had to be removed via emergency surgery. And there was a couple of days where we weren't sure if he was going to survive, but he did. So why did he? But his son didn't. He tried to get his son help, but addiction it was just too strong for him, and it took him. And now Ric Flair has to live with that every day of his life, knowing that there's just something inside that he couldn't control, and neither could his son. And it took his son's life. So what a tragic way to have to keep going. As much as you see, there's good times and stuff too. There's time when he gets his statue unveiled. If you've been seeing these pictures that have been going by where he had his statue unveiled by WWE, when his daughter Charlotte is competing in the WWE, doing really well. He's competing in all these high-profile matches and all these really seminal moments for him. But there's still that one thing that weighs heavily on him, is that he couldn't save his son. And that's got to be something that just he thinks about every day, and he's going to carry that with him for the rest of his life. And that's probably something that I don't think anybody would wish on their worst enemy. So it's a rough life. And if anything, I think the Ric Flair story, the example that it set was not, here's the path to success. Do what Ric Flair did and you'll be fine. I mean, yeah, he survived. You'll be okay. It's more of a warning, because there's way more examples of people who lived a life that Ric Flair did but didn't make it, and who were professional wrestlers also. I mean, you got guys like Chris Benoit, guys like Eddie Guerrero, China, all these people who lived really hard and fast, and they didn't make it out. Ric Flair was one of the lucky ones, and I think he's very self-aware about that. And I'm sure if he could go back and talk to his younger self and maybe give him some advice, it would probably be, hey, you know what, get a control of the difference between who you are and who your character is. At least that's the impression I got. And that's what I'm taking away from this documentary, and that's what made it so powerful, is that it was something that you could enjoy even if you are not a professional wrestling fan. I found it extremely, extremely informative and extremely interesting. So, but what did you guys think? Even if you didn't see the 30 for 30, what do you think about Ric Flair the person, knowing what we just talked about? What do you think of those things? Do you agree with my assessment? Do you not agree? What do you think? That's what we want to hear for TYT Sports. We want to know what you think about this documentary. And would you be interested to see if the WWE or if 30 for 30 was to do another documentary, who do you think should be their next subject? Is it another wrestler? They've already done one on Vince McMahon related to the XFL, but do you think they should focus on another wrestler or another aspect of professional wrestling? If so, throw it in the comments. Anybody if you've seen these videos before, you know that I jump in the comments, and if you take the time to actually write a comment related to our subjects, I'm going to take the time to respond to you, because I appreciate every single person who jumps onto this video and actually takes the time to watch it and then takes the time to formulate an intelligent response. Not every response is worthy of not every comment is worthy of a response, but hey, that's just the way the internet works. So thank you guys. As always, thank you to TYT Sports. Make sure you join me every Tuesday night at 10:05 p.m. Eastern Time on the TYT Sports Facebook page for 10:05 Live. With me, your host, we talk Raw, we talk SmackDown, we talk anything you guys want to talk about. It's a live feed. It's got the Facebook Live comments section going. So as you guys jump on and make your comments, I acknowledge you jumping in, and I talk about whatever it is you want to talk about. So it's a great show. It's a great way for you to interact with me and for us to all interact together as fans of professional wrestling, something that Ric Flair has devoted his life to, and we're thankful for that. So thank you guys as always, and I'll see you pretty soon. Bye-bye.